France are the current holders of the FIFA World Cup heading into this year's competition, but the story of their self-destructive, harrowing capitulation 12 years ago is quite a thriller. Welcome to Halftime Football, where today I'm going to go over what took place during France's mutiny at the 2010 World Cup, why it happened, and what followed. First of all, let's take a look at what preceded the competition, and to be honest, something felt off from the very beginning. France headed into the tournament fresh off a total humiliation at Euro 2008, where they finished bottom of their group under Raymond Domenech, and just a year later they even made a meal out of qualifying for the South Africa World Cup. They finished behind Serbia in their qualifying group and were forced to extra time in a playoff against Ireland, where even then they needed a blatant handball by Thierry Henry to progress. Anyway, fast forward to the actual preparations for the tournament, and my god, trouble was brewing beneath the surface. The French Football Federation announced that manager Raymond Domenech would be relieved of his duties following the tournament no matter the outcome, and he did his very best to fall out with the captain of the team, as Henry was told that he would not play any major part in South Africa. The squad as a whole were also rocked by the notable omissions of Karim Benzema, Patrick Vieira and Samir Nasri from the final 23-man cut, and they were situated in Knysna, a training base which was already slammed by France's sporting minister for being too expensive. On top of that, William Gallas immediately refused to do any sort of media obligations or interviews, which indicated disrepute. Gallas was then bizarrely involved in a dune buggy crash, and Nicolas Anelka suffered the same fate with a different vehicle after he crashed a bike during a France team session. Elsewhere, Lassana Diarra had to withdraw from the squad following an unknown intestinal injury which was likely caused by the high altitude of the training base. In more criminal matters, Franck Ribéry and notable absentee Karim Benzema were the centre of an underage prostitution investigation. This occurred following a raid on a Paris nightclub shortly before the tournament, though they were later acquitted of all charges. All of these factors, however, contributed to a sort of bizarre feeling within the camp, and there was never really much confidence to begin with. Even 60% of L'Equipe readers believed that group stage counterparts Uruguay, South Africa and Mexico had more chance of qualifying than Le Bleu. Though there was still obviously some hope within the nation, but things boiled over pretty quickly after that. Before France had even started their first game, the first rift of many occurred. Florent Malouda had supposedly been displaying a poor attitude in training, which led Domenech to tell him he wouldn't be playing the opener against Uruguay, and Malouda had to be held back by captain Patrice Evra as he tried to square up to the manager. Obviously, Malouda didn't reclaim his place for the game, but it still seemed as though France were poised to win it as Nicolas Ladera was sent off for Uruguay with 10 minutes to go. However, disagreements and bad relationships within the camp began to transfer onto the pitch. Supposedly, the old guard, spearheaded by Franck Ribéry and Nicolas Anelka, were not happy with the presence of young Yoann Gourcuff as he threatened their status. The older players decided to just not pass to the playmaker, causing difficulties breaking forward, and those players even went so far as to request that he be dropped as a starter for Abou Diaby or Thierry Henry. This lack of chemistry caused France to disappoint with a 0-0 draw in their opening game, but in the grand scheme of things it wasn't the worst result given that Uruguay were the best opponent in the group. France now had time to regroup, and Malouda publicly claimed that he had no grievances with Domenech, and the team were ready to fight against Mexico in a game where if they lost they would almost certainly be out. Almost a week passed without controversy within the camp, and it gave those at home a glimmer of hope, but obviously it all fell apart. Before the game, the old guard I mentioned earlier actually managed to get Yoann Gourcuff dropped from the starting 11, but that wasn't even remotely close to the worst thing that happened that day. After the first half, France were being held back by a resilient Mexico team who were arguably unlucky not to be leading as the teams went into the dressing room at 0-0. France made an unexpected change at the break as Nicolas Anelka didn't re-emerge onto the pitch, with André-Pierre Gignac taking his place. Suddenly the French team looked rattled, something had obviously phased them. Goals from Chicharito and Cuauhtemoc Blanco sunk Les Bleus, almost certainly condemning them to a disgraceful group stage exit in South Africa, but that still wasn't the biggest talking point of the day. Va te faire enculer, sale fille de pute, which literally translates to go fuck yourself dirty son of a whore, was spread across the front page of French newspaper L'Equipe. These the words of Nicolas Anelka towards Raymond Domenech after the halftime whistle blew, which caused a huge fight in the dressing room and obviously led to Anelka's substitution. From here, it all spiraled out of control. The French Football Federation decided in tandem with Domenech that it was fitting to send Anelka home from the tournament, as he'd disgraced the reputation of the manager, the team, the country as a whole, and he didn't even apologise for his actions. The remaining players then took to the pitch for training the next day, but it wasn't long before it truly came to light that the players were plotting to even further jeopardise the mood of the camp. Newly elected captain Patrice Evra did the thing that any leader would do, and he decided to start having an argument with the fitness coach Robert Duverne, which was about to become physical until Dominic decided to pull the two apart. Evra apparently told Duverne that the team were not going to train for the day in protest of sending Anelka home, so logically Duverne was fuming. Evra then led his squad back onto the team bus and drew the curtains closed in front of all the media. What was even more bizarre was the fact that the players actually handed a statement to Dominic which they insisted he read to the media. Baffled journalists listened on to the statement, which read as follows: "All the players in the French squad without exception wish to affirm their opposition to the decision taken by the French Football Federation, or FFF, to exclude Nicolas Anelka. We regret the incident at halftime of the France v Mexico match, but we regret even more the divulging of an event which was only the squad's business and was part and parcel of the life of a top-level team. At the squad's request, the player tried to engage in a dialogue. We regret that this move was willfully ignored. The FFF did not at any point try to protect the squad. It took a decision based solely on facts reported by the press without consulting the players. As a consequence, and to signal their opposition to the attitude adopted by most senior officials, all of the players decided not to participate in the training session scheduled for today." The players were essentially furious that Anelka had been sent home without any discussion, but it later emerged that Evra did actually have a meeting with Dominic and some heads from the FFF to discuss the situation. Either way though, the team didn't train on that fateful afternoon on the 20th of June, and the circus rolled on with even more twists and turns. Dominic left that day with his tail between his legs, but not before describing the mutiny as an aberration, an imbecility and a stupidity without name. Managing director of the team, Jean-Louis Valentin, resigned following the fiasco as he called it sickening and disgusting, while now imprisoned French President Nicolas Sarkozy brandished the situation as unacceptable. Sarkozy also sent France's sporting minister, Roselyne Bachelot, to make a speech to the players during which she questioned how the players wanted themselves to be remembered, what image they want to leave behind, and that they needed to face the situation head on. She claimed she was applauded and even reduced some of the younger players to tears, and the squad duly apologised to Dominic before returning to training the next day. At this point though, the feuds were common knowledge and many reputations were already absolutely shattered amongst the French public. Nonetheless, France still had a very slim chance of the World Cup, which had seemingly taken a back seat amongst all the infighting. Their final game came against host South Africa, and either team needed a big win and the result of Mexico and Uruguay's clash to be anything but a draw in order to progress. France arrived without Evra and Anelka, and Yoann Gourcuff had been restored to the starting lineup. However, after 20 minutes, South Africa took the lead, and just 5 minutes later, Gourcuff was sent off following a reckless elbow, and by halftime it was 2-0 to the hosts. Florent Malouda pulled one back with 20 minutes to go, but it was nothing more than mere consolation, as South Africa ran out 2-1 winners in the affair. While neither team progressed anyway because South Africa's goal difference was still less than Mexico's, Raymond Domenech still summed up France's campaign perfectly by throwing all his professionalism out the window as he walked down the tunnel refusing to shake the hand of his opposite manager Carlos Pereira. France were out, and so was the truth. The squad, manager and pretty much everyone associated were incompetent when it came to any sort of civility, and the French national team basically became public enemy number one. The players laid their weary heads on their pillows that night knowing that they got a job done, just not the one most people wanted. They'd successfully created a culture of player power within the squad, and they'd managed to embarrass the entire coaching team and federation, and one may question truly how proud they are of that. They woke up the following day and the group of selfish egos were condemned to the fate of living like the common man as they were forced to fly home in economy class for 15 hours. The team landed and were greeted by more police protection than fans, as most French people tried their very best to forget everything that had happened over the last couple weeks. The president of the FFF, Jean-Pierre Escalette, claimed he felt it was his duty to resign from the federation following the tournament, and of course Dominic was to be leaving his post as manager even before all this happened. 5 ringleaders were also summoned to a meeting with the FFF where the disciplinary committee laid down sanctions. Nicolas Anelka was banned for 18 international games for his insulting words towards Dominic, while Patrice Evra and Franck Ribéry were banned for 5 and 3 games respectively as they failed to lead the team properly in their roles of captain and vice-captain. Jérémy Toulalan received a 1-match suspension for supposedly writing the statement which Dominic read to the media, while Eric Abidal escaped punishment despite supposedly refusing to play against South Africa. As for the rest, well, the entire squad weren't called up by new manager Laurent Blanc for his first international game as a punishment. Now really the major question here is, why did all of this happen and who was at fault? Well, realistically it was a bit of everyone. The players obviously hold a lot of responsibility for their actions, but looking in the grand scheme of things, there's a whole lot more beneath the surface. Oh My Goal did an excellent investigation featuring interviews from Gaël Clichy, Zachary Bagner and other experts about French football and politics at the time, so if you want to look deeper into that side of things, I'll link their video in the description. Looking purely at the footballing side though, and there were still quite a few faults. First off, the team had no leaders. Gone were the days of Thuram, Gallas, Vieira and Zidane, with the aforementioned Patrice Evra captaining in South Africa since Thierry Henry relinquished the armband. Evra obviously led the team onto the bus that day and clashed with the fitness coach, but from there springs a whole other debate. Was the Anelka punishment too harsh, and was the reaction after it justified? Was there actually more behind it? More disputes? Well, no one except Anelka and Dominic really know, but Anelka's international retirement following the game may indicate more problems beyond what the public know. For now, however, there's no point in speculating, and all we can really say is that French team, and especially the ringleaders, made complete fools of themselves. Behind all this though was one other clown, and it was the manager himself, Mr. Raymond Domenech. Domenech was an enigma, and as I mentioned in my Bizarre Superstitions video, the coach often elected to pick players based on their star signs rather than their actual ability. As I mentioned, he didn't choose Samir Nasri, Patrick Vieira and Karim Benzema in his 2010 squad, and he also severely shook things up by essentially making William Gallas and Thierry Henry outcasts, both of whom should have had the captaincy ahead of Patrice Evra due to their experience. When you ostracize your key players, they're logically going to appear largely unbothered, and with everyone else in the team looking up to them as the beacons of wisdom, they'll unintentionally impose a negative influence on the rest of the squad. This created a squad of players who are not truly committed to the good of their country, but rather their own interests and their own performance, which I don't think they can be fully blamed for. Domenech also seemed tactically clueless, rarely making changes of any significance to the formation or personnel, and he was generally just hated by everyone. The players, the fans, and probably even the FFF hated this guy, yet he still sat firmly in his manager's office after a humiliating exit in Euro 2008 and a rubbish qualifying campaign for the tournament. With an uninspired manager that the players just don't like, how can you expect the squad to perform at all? So in conclusion, it seems as though pretty much everyone has some sort of blame in this. The players for their antics, Domenech for being clueless, and of course the FFF for actually keeping that man in his job. While this was an issue that pinpointed other societal problems within France, these groups I mentioned still aren't totally innocent. Nonetheless, those days are long gone, and France now shine on the international stage, and they're likely to totally forget the demons of 2010 if they perform well in Qatar. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please like and subscribe. Also, I just want to point out quickly a short kind of announcement that I am actually going to France on holiday for the next month and a half or so, and I think I'll be able to bring my setup with me. It's just the upload schedule may be a bit more sporadic, a bit more inconsistent, so I apologize for that. But anyway, like I said, please like, subscribe, let me know what you thought down below, and I'll see you next time.